Oh, that's backwards. Let's keep that. Is it the barrel that gives all the flavor to whiskey? Sort of. I know that's the worst answer. That's like saying it depends, and it's something that I teach our Psalms to never, ever, under any circumstance say, and I basically just did it. But rules were made to be broken, my friend. I'm Daniel Whittington. I'm the Chancellor at Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. If you're in whiskey circles, you hear a lot, some from whiskey nerds, and some from whiskey people, makers even. The barrel is 80% of the flavor, or the barrel is almost all the flavor in whiskey. And I'm not going to take that on in the sense that I think I know what they mean by that, and what I'm about to say is an unfair characterization, and so I don't think that they mean this, but I also hear that from the general consumer, and they don't have any of the context, and they'll say, yeah, the barrel is all the flavor in whiskey. Without the barrel, there's no flavor. And I've heard that. I know that sounds ridiculous, but I've heard that a lot. So what does the barrel do to flavor, and is it responsible for most of the flavor in whiskey? Yes, but it's not just the barrel. It's not like there was nothing and then the barrel and there's your flavor. Here's how. Nerdy science time. Flavor is created in whiskey in multiple steps in the process, and I'm not going to name chemicals or we're going to be here for hours. But first you have the grain, and different grains provide different flavors. And I don't even just mean corn and rye have different flavors, which they do, but even different strains of barley, different strains of corn. Iron Root has gone down the path of proving different strains of corn and small percentage in the mash bill can change everything. Waterford has spent an entire business model showing that farms make different whiskey. Different farm, different barley, different flavor. So the next place is when you start to ferment things. You start fermenting, you have yeast. Yeast creates flavor. Different yeast strains create different kinds of flavor compound. And how you ferment changes what flavors get created by the yeast. You do a short fermentation, you get a certain kind of character profile. You do a long 4, 5, 6, 7 day fermentation, you get a whole different flavor profile. You do a 2 or 3 week fermentation, which there are out there, you get a whole other flavor profile, right? And now you have a wash, and you run that into a still. Now, the distillation doesn't create flavor, but it isolates flavor, right? So there are all these chemicals in there. You distill it, you're pulling out flavors and attached to the ethanol, and you're keeping some and not the others. And so you're creating a new overall flavor by picking and choosing what you keep from that wash. And then you have that new make. Now, does new make have flavor? Yes. I just did a sit-down comparison with Jake Clemens from the Texas Whiskey Festival, and we just tried 4 different new makes from the Scottish distillery Holyrood, and they were all night and day, remarkably different spirits, even though they were all barley. It's just different barley strains, different yeast strains, and they were not even close to each other. It's astounding, the difference, right? Then you put that in a barrel, and then what happens? Okay. I'm moving quicker than I thought I would on this. This is really good. Hopefully you're keeping up. This is Peerless Bourbon. Peerless is got like a really long whiskey history. As a matter of fact, it was started pre-Prohibition. It was really successful. It did medicinal whiskey. It sort of went out of business post-Prohibition. It was revived by 4th, 5th generation, I think, family members of the distillery, and they managed to get back the original distillery license number from the original Peerless distilling, and then spent a lot of time making Peerless whiskey. They went the full nerd route, and all my nerdy Kentucky bourbon friends, they all love Peerless. I've liked everything that I've had from Peerless, and we even use one of their whiskeys in our level 1 blind trio tastings. But this one is double oak, and from what I've read, it sounds like they had some leaky barrels they had to empty out and put in a different barrel. And instead of just acting like that didn't happen, they used that to release what they called a double oak. So started in one new American oak and then put into another barrel to keep aging. And now it's a thing that's intentional and on purpose. Because they release batches, this is a high proof whiskey. This is 54.15. This is batch 11 of the double oak. Wow, that is molasses and black pepper and oily wood varnish. And there's a note, man, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but there's a note that's almost dill that just goes a little bit and then vanishes completely. And it gives it this, sour is the wrong word, but it gives it this sort of like acidic tang to the nose. But overall, it's like a really oak varnish molasses. That's hefty. Ooh. Ooh, that goes for days. I like that. There is a slight, I really wish there was a better word. Maybe you guys can put it in the comments, a better word for sour. Because it's not sour, but it lives on the palate where sour lives. It interacts with your tongue in much the same direction that a sourness reacts, but it's not sour. And I, for the life of me, can't find the word. It's not astringent. That's a whole different thing. That's why I say tangy, but I've had this note a lot, and I can't put my finger on one word that's like, yes, that's it. I can use that from now on. So give it your best shot. Well, it's very oak forward. Well, I guess which is double oak is what you're going for. And there's a lot of richness and depth. This is a high proof, heavy oak bourbon. And if you like that, you're going to love this whiskey. I'm going to add some water because it's so high proof. And let's talk about the barrel. So what happens in a barrel? Does the barrel add all the flavor? Because before there's none? No, we've already talked about, before you even get to the barrel, there are myriad of elaborate flavor choices that you can make. And this is why I say my distiller friends who say the barrel gives 80% of the flavor, they mean this with all of the context. I'm not talking about them. But the flavor that's in there once you put it in a barrel is not there only because of the barrel. So barrels do three things: additive, subtractive, and transformative. Additive is, or subtractive is the charcoal layer. That's a filtration layer in a barrel. It sucks out compounds you don't want in a final spirit. It's what helps sort of clean up a new make a little bit and make it more what you think of when you think of whiskey. That's a small part of the flavor impact of a barrel. A little bit bigger impact is the additive, which is the red layer where you're getting the wood, actual wood tannins, and it's what happens when the alcohol eats the wood and pieces of the wood absorb into the spirit and add the impact of oak to a spirit. That's a lot of the dryness in this and a lot of that wood varnishy kind of note. But there's a third layer, and the third layer of flavors is the majority of the flavors typically, and that's transformative. That's the new flavor compounds chemically that are created when alcohol and oak interact with each other. They break each other down and fight with each other, and they create whole new flavor compounds. And that is the vast majority of flavors in a whiskey, is this transformative interaction with wood and spirit. Yes? Okay. So, does wood add all of that? Yeah, because barrels are doing additive and transformative. That's two of the three things. That's a lot of flavor. But the thing is that the flavors that are created are based on two sides of an interaction, and wood only carries with it certain things. What you do on all of the stages of the process up until you put it in a barrel determines what chemicals the barrel has to interact with. Now do you see what I mean? All of the changes of the flavor profile up to the point where you put it in a barrel completely alter what a barrel does to the new make spirit. And so the same barrel, change any of those steps, you completely change the end product taste. And so by that definition, which this feels super nitpicky, but again, this is something I've heard a lot. By that definition, is barrel responsible for the majority? No. Does it partner with the new make to create whole new things? Yes. And so I don't know what the right word for that is, because this is not a simple answer, because I would argue the new make doesn't provide the majority and the barrel doesn't provide the majority. The majority of flavor in a whiskey, I think, comes from the violent battle and sometimes gentle acceptance between new make spirit and a barrel. That's where all the flavor in whiskey comes from. Most of the flavor in whiskey comes from. And if that's not the most complicated way to answer, does the barrel give you most of the flavor? I don't know what is. You should be proud of me. It's about as nerdy as it gets. Okay, adding a little bit water to this before we wrap it up. It bumps up the sweetness a little, and it adds a little dry note that wasn't quite there before. And now the palate is just dark chocolate, bitter dark chocolate, cherry, and a little bit of oak tannin. This one goes great with a dash of water. It's 50% better for my flavor preferences for a bourbon. And this was a good whiskey already. But yeah, I like it way better with water. And I'm really glad you're here. Cheers.